In this video, we share a series of brief presentations alongside diagrams documenting our ongoing process of thinking and consultation and rethinking. Thinking towards a new future under the New Zealand Institute of Skills and Technology, all the ITP research directors came together to work on how we can collaborate in future. 16 work streams are underway at the moment, and this particular video shows a portfolio of ideas that can prompt us, provocate us, give us new ideas, be interesting and productive towards research in a contemporary terrain. Sam Mann and colleagues Phil Osborne, Richard Mitchell and Ray O'Brien started with this diagram to identify what they interpreted as old rules and potential new directions for research.
Setting the future of research for the Polytechnic sector is an interesting challenge as we're doing research already. So how can we make that better and better fit for our communities and industries that we work for? So the challenge is to say, well, these are the things we're doing. How can we make them better? So it's about taking things from being a research on to a research with, or being a research that's done sort of independently to research that is done collaboratively. So it's not saying that the first ones are bad, but we're saying we value these other ones a bit more. And what we're hoping is that people will look at the research that they're doing or the research that they're planning and use these sets of words to be thinking, yep, I can lift this, I can do this in a different way.
Our diagram was then developed further into a series of continuums contrasting more traditional with more contemporary interpretations. Zooming in, we see that one of these shows a movement from single disciplinary to transdisciplinary practice.
I'd like to talk about the transition from single disciplinary to transdisciplinary work, which I visualise as a braided river. The project, called Informing Ecological Understanding Using Analysis of Soundscape, is led by Rhys Jones, a microbiologist and ecologist, and Kent McPherson, a sonic artist. Both are inspired by the soundscape ecology work of Bernie Krause. They've made recordings of birdsong in the Kennedy Bay forest on the Coromandel Peninsula that enable baseline measurement of the bird population by species. Over the next few months, Rhys will be part of a volunteer team carrying out pest eradication in the area, while Kent will create digital visualisations of the initial recordings. Then they'll record every quarter for the next few years to generate comparative bird population data over time. Two very different disciplines flowing together. Other streams join them at different points. For example, citizen scientists carrying out parallel bird counts, or a light artist collaborating on the production of visualisations. And always the streams rejoining to continue this work.
We then focused on the centrality of the Treaty of Waitangi and created a spine through the middle of our diagram.
Ko whakataha te mauna, ko Waitangi te awa, ko Ngāpui te iwi, ko Ngāti Hine te hapu, ko Tauwhara te marae, ko Phil Alexander Crawford tōku ingoa. For researchers, Te Tiriti o Waitangi is the foundation, and we need to assess our research against Te Tiriti o Waitangi. Te Tiriti o Waitangi Excellence Framework is a tool that all of us, including researchers, can use to test our methodology and practice. A good example of this is the Taitukato Regional Investment Plan, or TRIP for short. This used a kaupapa Māori methodology and partnered with Māori, for Māori and by Māori. The great thing about the TRIP was that it was in partnership with Māori to design solutions by Māori and for Māori.
With vocational education, professional practice and work-based learning to the fore of minds at the moment, another element in our diagram comes into its own, namely research that is practice-led.
A lot of the work I do is in work-based learning. So here I'm going to talk to you about research at work. So with workplaces, things are changing very often. So we want to be able to be agile with our approach. We often use what's called an action research methodology, where you may undertake one particular part of the project and then, depending on the results of that, then undertake the next stage. So for example, if at work you were wanting to look at improving the culture of a team, for example, you may start with a survey, do that survey, and then look at the results that you find from that, and then feed that into the next stage. So the next stage of the research might be something like a focus group, where you're going to get all of the team together and try and help them they will help you come up with some ideas for how to improve, say, communication within the team. And then the output from that would be something that is of use to the workplace.
Further discussions elaborated on the elements of our diagram. For example, where we focus on working with and on collaborating.
What I really like about the new drivers of research is that they pretty much reflect my own preferred way of doing research, and also the way that we do research in the Polytechnic sector, research that's relevant and applied. So I'm going to tell you about a little project that I carried out with the Regional Council and with the Tangata Whenua group here in Tauranga. The project was requested by the Regional Council, who wanted some research to gather data about recreational activities in a particular area to contribute to a resource consent. So the research was co-designed, all the questions and the methods and everything was co-designed with the Regional Council and also with Tangata Whenua. The research assistants were employed by the Regional Council and by Tangata Whenua, and I oversaw the project. At the end of the day, the research findings were used as part of the resource consent application, contributing to the assessment of environmental effects.
In the spirit of co-creation, we crowdsourced our diagram, asking for feedback and responses from a range of researchers. These speech bubbles contain some of these responses. Many were glad to co-create and thought we are doing great work. Obviously, in our enthusiasm, however, we had included too much information and needed to simplify. Students also needed to be considered. And importantly, the treaty should be woven throughout and not appearing at the bottom of what we had considered a spine, but had not been read like that by many. Also, many did not want us to underestimate so-called older ways of doing research. And many thought our diagram, meant as a set of continuums, read as too binary a system, that it sets up a false dichotomy, and that we should rather focus on current shifts and the most important points we want to get across in terms of current thinking about research. Our Kaitahu Katohutohu's office responded with a waka and a set of priorities based on the treaty. So we went back to the drawing board, incorporating responses and these priorities received from our Katohutohu's office. We tried to incorporate all of these into a new draft with more traditional approaches on the outside of the diagram. We then arrived at a research opportunities framework with key words. One of these is transformation.
So looking at a discipline like business for the health sector, traditionally we would have looked at HR on its own, or supply chain or finance. Now we also need to look at a transformative approach, taking into account all those disciplines in partnership with the health professionals. What do partnerships look like? It requires a collaboration right from the beginning of identification of an issue, working together to solve the problem and then implement a change in partnership, all of us working together to make it a transformative change. So while we still need single discipline incremental projects, now more than ever we need the interdisciplinary projects running across the sector, including the health professionals and the researchers, to create the transformative change we need in Aotearoa, New Zealand and the world.
We then arrived at this version to focus on the key priorities rather than also on more traditional approaches, as we wish the framework to be clear and as simple as possible to read. One part of this weave includes the words emancipatory, engaged, tai-ao, or environment, and voice, thus giving voice to all. My contribution to this portfolio of ideas centers around two presentations focusing on the same topic, namely a war that was fought between the 19th and 20th centuries. On the one hand, we see a research project that presents us with a seemingly neutral third-person voice, relating the events, the male protagonists' roles, and also the effects on a small part of the population. The second, more recent research project tries to present us with many voices, the voices of not only the male protagonists, but also of women, children, the aged, animals, indigenous populations, immigrants, many other voices and of the peoples who were affected by this war. So in comparison, a more traditionalist approach versus a more contemporary take with its focus on presenting a heterogeneity of voices. Our last diagram fully honours the Rio and connects the parts of the weave as interconnected focus points for a possible future NZIST Research Opportunities Framework, which others could elaborate on, expand on, critique or change. Ngā mihi nui to our presenters. Thank you for the work that you've done for this portfolio of ideas. We hope that our viewers will be able to use these ideas in classrooms, in workplaces, and when they work collaboratively together. Ngā mihi nui also to our viewers. Thank you for listening to us, for looking at our ideas and for using them in the future.